Sayadaw explained the day before yesterday, Sayadaw was preaching on Four Noble Truths in brief. So among those Four Noble Truths, as Sayadaw explained, that there are a group of former two and a group of latter two. So in the former two, they are of Samudaya, Dukkha Satya and Samudaya Satya. That is the truth of suffering and the truth of the cause of suffering, and they are equivalently also termed as Vata. And the remaining or the latter two are, these are called Vivada Satya. These remaining two are not to be walked through your meditation practice, but for the former two, cause of suffering and the suffering, it always exists in each and every one. So that's why we have to walk out through these two truths. As for the latter two, they belong to Lokotara, that is the supramundane, and the former two are within the field of mundane. So as for the supramundane, for the Ariya, or only the noble who have reached to the Ariya stage, they have these two types of two types of noble truth or Vivada Satya. And they are also not to be noted. So Sayadaw explained, only to the two former parts, that is Dukkha Satya and Samudaya Satya, only these two should be noted, and in brief Sayadaw have touched on the day before yesterday. Sayadaw explained the Vivada or the Dukkha Satya. To understand more clearly, this Dukkha Satya or the truth of suffering is the whole of you. So if you remember like that, it will be easier for you. And for Samudaya Satya, that is the cause of the truth of suffering, is whenever we encounter from the sense of seeing, hearing, smell, etc., because we thought all are pleasurable, so we crave for it, we like it, we attach to it, and we cling to it. So Sayadaw explained in a simplest form to understand Dukkha Satya, that is the truth of the suffering, is whenever we focus our mind on the rising and falling, one rising, as we note, this is one Dukkha Satya. One falling, as we note, equivalently, it is also Dukkha Satya. So to the present occurrences, if we note, we will come to understand the nature of Dukkha Satya, whether it is rising Dukkha Satya or maybe the falling Dukkha Satya. As we note immediately to this object, we will come to know. So as expounded by the Lord Buddha, Sayadaw explained that to come to understand this Dukkha Satya, we have to focus on these present occurrences, and we will come to understand distinctively. Sayadaw explained, as we note this rising and falling, these ultimate nature or the absolute truths are profound or deep-seated to understand. As well, it is very difficult to see. Why it is very difficult to see? Sayadaw explained that though we are asked to note on the rising and falling of the abdomen, in the beginning we will just see the form of the abdomen, that is heaving up and down, and later on we will come to see the manners of the movement, and later on only we will come to stiffness, tension, etc. Only when we come to see the stiffness and tension, and at the present moment, then we will come to see Paramattha or the absolute truth. When this Paramattha, the ultimate or the absolute truth, is the real Dukkha Satya, that is the truth of suffering. So before we are able to pick up this stiffness, tension, etc. Whenever we observe from our noting mind, we will be only seeing piññata, that is the conventional truth. Piññati, that is the conventional truth. Only the conventional truth we will be able to pick up from our mind. And we will be able to see the movement or the manners that is going on in our abdomen. So that's why to be able to see the absolute truth is deep-seated. That's why Sayadaw says it is profound in nature. For the non-meditators, whenever their mind focuses on any object, their mind will only know the conventional form and shape, the manner and all the verbal names and all these conventional terms. Only when a person is able to note, then when they are in progress and reach to an attentive state, then they will come to understand the nature of Paramattha or absolute truth or ultimate truth. There are some who are in practice, they thought they know Paramattha, the absolute truth, but it is not yet true. So these Dhamma nature, as they are profound or deep-seated, then at what time in our wisdom, how we would know? Sayadaw cited the Pali phrase, and Sayadaw says that only when opposing Dhamma nature are eradicated or they were at distance, then deep-seated or the profound nature will reveal to a being. So that means only when your mind is freed from these opposing Dhamma nature, then one would be able to see with one's wisdom of Paramattha or the absolute truth. So when as explain these opposing Dhamma nature, the opposing Dhamma nature, what are they? Sayadaw explained, and these are of 5. The first kind is called Kamissana Nivarana. Nivarana means they are the hindrances. So this number 1 is our craving or desire to all the adorable and lovable objects. That is Kamicchanda Nivarana. That means from our sense of seeing, hearing, smell, taste, touch, etc., we always like to encounter with all the pleasurable senses. In summarization, all the attractable or lovable objects, we always crave for them. And second Nivarana or hindrance is called ill will or Vyapada. That ill will is whenever we have to encounter with any negative object, instantly we develop anger, aversion, etc. So mind behavior. Our mind is lethargic and it is lazy and it is clouded with Chiñamita, that is sleepiness and drowsiness. It is not sharp, it is not clever, and we cannot note it properly. So this is the third kind of opposing Dhamma nature or hindrance. And the fourth kind is whenever we remember of the past unwholesomeness in us or akusala, we regret and we have remorse. And sometimes we remember that we have not yet done all the wholesomeness too, then we regret. So in that way we develop Odisha and Kokosa, that is worries and flurries, as the third kind of opposing Dhamma nature. And the fifth kind of opposing Dhamma nature or hindrance is called Vicikesa Nivarana. Vicikesa Nivarana. That is the perplexity or the doubt. Doubt that is this the true Dhamma? Is it the true teaching, etc., etc. So in that way we were having this perplexity as another opposing Dhamma nature. As for all the beings, except from our sleeping hour, as soon as we wake up, only at the sleeping hour our mind is quiet. As soon as we wake up, then our mind is always covered up with these 5 different kinds of nivarana or hindrances. So to eradicate these hindrances mean the opposite nature is we need to clean our mind or purify our mind. And we need to develop all the wholesomenesses in our mind, which is to eradicate the covering up or the opposing Dhamma nature, which is covering your mind and weakening your mind. Because our mind is covered up and weakened with these opposing Dhamma nature, we don't know what is dukkha satya, what is the truth of suffering, and we don't know also what is the truth of the cause of the suffering. So only when we are able to eradicate or freed from these opposing Dhamma nature, then when the opposing Dhamma nature are freed, one would be able to see the profound Dhamma nature. How we are able to see the profound Dhamma nature, Sayadaw will explain now. The opposing Dhamma nature, they oppose to what kind? They oppose to the purified mind, or they oppose to the kusala or the wholesome mind. So Sayadaw explained nivarana, the hindrance in English, means they prevent all the wholesomenesses, or they block or they hindered these wholesomenesses not to arise. In other words, they are impure, and because they are impure or dirtied, there is no chance to develop purity in one's mind. So whenever the mind is covered up with these hindrances, whatever the nature may be, whether one arises with kamisana, craving to sensual pleasures, or maybe sloth and torpor at times too, whatever the nature may be, then that mind is covered up with nivarana or hindrances. That's why we do not have the clarity of mind. Why we do not have the clarity of mind means our mind is covered up with all these opposing Dhamma nature. So as they block not to develop any wholesomeness in mind or clarity of mind, they prevent or they weaken so as not to develop any kind of analytical or differentiative truths of the knowledges. So that's why in the literature, Sayadaw explained, these kind of opposing nature they are weakening one's mind. They are making the mind not to be strong. So in that way, they were disparaged. In the line of our consciousness, these ultimate Dhamma nature are very difficult to see, as they are deep-seated, and as because they are so profound means they are not revealed to your mind. Then when we are able to eradicate these covering up opposing Dhamma nature, then that means one has come to see the profound Dhamma nature, or revealing all the truth. So Sayadaw explained that because this is hard to see, difficult to see, means if these opposing Dhamma nature are able to be eradicated, these profound Dhamma nature, however they are hard to be seen, but if these opposing Dhamma nature are expelled or dispelled, then it will reveal to one. Sayadaw explained these Dhamma nature or the opposing Dhamma nature are not the materiality as we are using every day. All the materiality that will wean off and they will destroy, or they rotten, or they will decay. But it is not like that. If we are unable to eradicate these opposing Dhamma nature, then they will be piling up in ourselves time and again more and more. So that's why it is important to eradicate is with what kind or how are we going to eradicate these opposing Dhamma nature. To these opposing Dhamma nature, first we must do it to weaken, and then later to lessen, and at one time to be able to exterminate or eradicate. So with what kind of practice or with what connective nature, when one will come to understand the real truth, is we need to practice methodically or meticulously or properly. So only with proper practice, in connected with this proper practice, one will come to understand, or the Dhamma nature of the ultimate truth will reveal to you. So Sarah explained, even though we understand the real method, how it is methodically we need to practice, but if we do not practice too, we do not come to understand the ultimate truth. So in other words, if we don't practice, we won't know these absolute truth at all. So in summarization, that is, to come to understand the absolute truth, we must practice methodically as we should do. Only connected with this systematic practice, the nature of the absolute truth will reveal to you, so that all these opposing Dhamma nature will become weak and lessen, and at one time we will be able to eradicate. If one doesn't know the right method, or if one knows the method, but if not practiced too, then one cannot understand the truth of the nature. But how are we going to eradicate these opposing Dhamma nature is important. So before this, if we don't study anything, we are ignorant, we don't know anything. So to eradicate, to weaken first, and then in the end to eradicate all these opposing Dhamma nature, it is very important to listen, to have the learned knowledge. That is, we must read the books, we must listen from the appropriate teachers, we must discuss about it. So only then we will have a good guidance how we are going to eradicate these nivarana, or how we are going to practice to dispel these hindrances. Only when the knowing is right, then we will come to see the right nature. As in the beginning of the discourse, as Sarah explained, whatever happens in your body, then or in you, then all these are as a whole, we should understand as this is dukkha satya. This is the truth of suffering. Then to come to understand the truth of suffering, we should practice methodically to come to know or to perceive the truth, or to come to understand the truth. So if we don't perceive or observe, we don't know at all. But if we observe or note, we will come to know. So that's why to come to understand the truth means that is the way to dispel nivarana or hindrances. To come to understand means, Sarah cited the phrase, and that is to observe to all the present occurrences. That means we need to have one kind of guardianship in us. That Sarah explained in accordance with our Buddhist teaching, or in Buddhist Sasana, whomsoever are so afraid to go wrong in the cycle of rebirth and death, then we need to have one guardianship. That one guardian is none other than sati or mindfulness. So Sarah says, if he has to say, it directly means keep your mind to the present occurrences. These present occurrences mean whenever we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, or rising, falling, lifting, stepping, etc. All these things, if we are mindfully watching or observing, then one could say that this person is staying in with mindfulness or sati. So, as a direct meaning means, we have to observe to all the present occurrences. Although Sayadaw have to say this sati or mindfulness as a leader of a mind quality, though it for this strong mindfulness is we need to have a right aim. That right aim, samadhi-sankappa, have the quality of jhana. So with that right aim, we are able to penetrate our mind into the object precisely and properly. But if our noting or observing mind is not concurrent and not penetrating into the object too, then we cannot see it clearly the true nature. So that's why we need to put an energy from our mind. That is called right effort. With the right effort and the right aim, if we are able to note it, then the strong mindfulness or strong awareness will occur. Sarah gave an example like you are eating at a table. So when you want to pick up a piece of eatable object, then you need to pierce it with a fork. So before you pierce it with a fork, then you have to aim to that object, and with that aim you need to use the effort. Although there is an aim, but if you are not using the effort, then the fork cannot reach to that piece of object. So it is important to pick up that eatable object. Not only you should have the aim, but you must have the effort to pierce this eatable object. So if you want it, then you have to have the right aim as well. You need to have the effort, then you will have that piece of eatable object. If you are piercing it not properly too, then it is not piercing to that object. Only when we are having the right effort, then you will be piercing the object. And if that effort you are using is proper, then it will be effective. If not, it is not effective. So only when it is able to pierce it properly and thoroughly, then you will get that eatable object. So likewise, in our mindfulness, if we have the right aim and the right effort, then we will have that strong power of sati or mindfulness. When sati or mindfulness is nearer to the object, and if it is piercing that object means, then you are having a good momentary concentration. That kind to have in you is the mindfulness. You are focusing onto the object it is not at a distance. There is no gap. It didn't slip off. It is together with the object, or it is piercing the object. So that is the time you are having khanika samadhi or momentary concentration. As expressed in the sati or mindfulness, how one to penetrate, although there are many components of mind, the heading or the leader of these mind constituents is the sati or mindfulness. So with this power of sati, then if we are noting or observing, this becomes as a prevention or protection to one's mind. If there is a guard or protection because of that strong mindfulness, it guards you from the opposing Dhamma nature or the hindrances. If one is able to note for one moment, that moment is the time your mind is guarded or protected. If you are able to note more, for example, for 1 minute, then for within that 1 minute there are 60 moments, so for 60 moments you are protected. If you are able to note for 5 minutes, you will have 300 times or moments are guarded. And if you are able to note for 1 hour, there are 3,600 times you will be guarded. Once a mind is having this protection or a guard, then there is no chance for the opposing Dhamma nature to seep in. So your mind is safely guarded from the opposing Dhamma nature. If your mind is protected from the opposing Dhamma nature, your mind is freed from these opposing Dhamma nature. At that time, that is called you have vimutti, or you are freed from these attacks. So at that time you will have calm or composure.
Santi.
Santi. So as your mind is liberated from the opposing Dhamma nature, as you goes on practice long in this meditation field, whenever your mind focus on the object, it couples or it goes together with the object. It pierces the object. So this penetrating or piercing to the object becomes so many times or numerous, then the profound nature of dukkha or the profound nature of suffering will come to reveal to one's mind. So at that moment, in yogi's mind, although we may be noting the rising and falling of the abdomen, there is no more of the form and shape of your abdomen. You have surpassed the nature of mannerism, and you will come to see or observe the stiffness, tension, etc. So in that way, you are understanding the truths of suffering. Dukkha Jnana. With the direct noting, because we note properly as explained, we come to understand. So what we come to understand is, we come to understand the truth of the suffering. As we come to understand the truth of the suffering, then that is the time. There is no chance in your mind to develop tanha, craving or greed. So as soon as you are knowing this truth of the suffering as a spontaneous effect, then you eradicate samudaya sakya, that is the truth of the cause of the suffering. At this time, though we have to say as eradicate mean, because your mind is guarded and knowing the truism of the suffering, then there is no chance for these defilements like greed or craving to seep into your mind. When we come to see dukkha satya or the truth of suffering clearly or vividly, then that is we are attaining this clarity in mind is due to samma patipatti. That is, we are practicing methodically. If we are practicing methodically, then at that time we are abandoning all these greed and craving. That means we are able to abandon me. Actually, we are keeping all these defilements at a distance, or we are suppressing at that moment of methodical practice. So that means, Shara explained, if you don't practice it methodically, you won't come to know the truth. If you practice methodically or systematically, you will come to know the truth. So how we come to know the truth if we practice methodically is through theory and through from practice we will come to know. As for one who is absent in sati, and if one is not practicing in a practical manner, then we are not able to eradicate, or we cannot change the line of consciousness from the covering nature of these from the cover up of these opposing Dhamma nature. So if we are able to practice methodically, then only we will be able to substitute in our mind with the purity or purification instead of all the impurities. So when we are noting the rising and falling, or if we are observing with the strong awareness from the seeing, hearing, smell, taste, touch, rising, falling, etc., then if we are strongly and powerfully noting, we will come to see the dukkha satya. But if we are not noting or observing methodically, we are unable, or we are not able to see the truth of suffering. But if our noting is weak, or then pinyati, or the conventional terms or the conventional truth are covering up the absolute truth too, you are unable to see the absolute truth as well. That means if you are able to note with strong, powerful mindfulness as guided by, then if you practice methodically, you will come to know the truth. How you will come to know the truth? Sarah explained, even to the minute behavior from your body. For example, like you are blinking. As you are blinking the eyelids, there are movements in the eyelids. Before you are closing or opening the eyelids, then there are numerous consciousness are working out, and it is followed as an action of blinking in your eyelids. So all these work out from your consciousness, as well from the blinking from your physical part, all are in the nature of dukkha satya, that is the truth of suffering. So, wanted to close your eyelids or wanted to open your eyelids as well, all these are the natural workout from the mind and matter flux, and you come to understand the nature of dukkha satya, or the truth of suffering. To come to understand the truth of the suffering it is crucial, or it is very important to note with the right aim and right effort to be able to pierce to the object concurrently and precisely. Then you will come to understand the nature of the truth of suffering. That means, Sayadaw says, it is very obvious. Only through the systematic or methodical practice you will come to see the truth. To come to see the truth of the suffering or dukkha satya, in the former part, before we take up the Dhamma practice, we are having the Samma Patipatti. What we have the morality. Morality, as a bhikkhu, the bhikkhus have to observe what they have to observe. As for the lay people, as we have observed the 8 precepts, then we have to observe it properly. So as we observe the morality properly without any breakage, then we are training our bodily behavior and verbal behavior. So if our bodily behavior and verbal behavior are pure and faultless, and if we are able to take up the 5 kinds of able to eradicate the 5 kinds of opposing Dhamma nature, then as we proceed with this practice, then we are able to eradicate from the transgressional type of defilements, and then to the medium type or the obsessive type of defilements, and to the fine or the latent type of defilements. All will be suppressed, and at one time we are able to eradicate all. So that means if we are able to stay in with this described manner, we are staying for a moment fully in the sasana, in this Buddha sasana. So if we are able to train ourselves as described just now, then we are staying in with oneself sasana. To understand the dukkha satya, we need to trodden these three noble stages of the training of sila, training in morality, and training in samadhi or concentration, and training ourselves with piññā or wisdom. With these three types of training, we are able to eradicate or suppress gross defilements, medium type of defilements, and fine or potential type of defilements. So if we are able to eradicate all these defilements and training ourselves with these three stages of noble training, what would one would be? One become pure or purified. If one is pure, then that being becomes civilized. If one is civilized, then that being becomes meek. And if one becomes meek, then he or she is an adorable person. So that is the way to each and every second we are training ourselves with sasana to oneself. If we are training ourselves with sasana from second to second, then that is the time not you are having a protection to yourself, but at the same time you are not harming or hurting any other people with improper action. So that is the real civilization, or making a real sasana in, or building in the real sasana in yourself. So with this type of training means you have conquered yourself. This you have conquered yourself means that is you are not winning on other people or any outside nature, but you have trained yourself to win yourself. That is, with the way of Dhamma training, you conquered yourself. So if you are able to train yourself with Dhamma training, then you win yourself. So if you are winning yourself, then you are at peace. So in that way, every beings on this earth can win or conquer oneself. How it will be peaceful on this earth. So to train oneself with this training, you will have the real civilization. To accomplish this real civilization, and with the good training or the noble training in you, how to accomplish it, we need to fulfill ourselves with two factors. Number one is, we must listen attentively, seriously, and with due respect to the discourses or to the teaching. And secondly, we must have the due respect, and carefully and properly we must practice it. So first kind is, we must listen with due respect and seriously. Then later on we have to discuss, and then we take up the practice. As we are in the field of practice, we need to practice with due respect, seriously and attentively, so much so that your focusing mind should pierce and couple together onto that object. Then you will be seeing as you should be. Only if you are noting as precise, and as you goes on training, you are training yourself to develop the real civilization in yourself. So that means you are conquering yourself or you win yourself. But in the line of your practice, if any factor is lacking or deficient, then you cannot conquer yourself, you are not winning yourself. If you are not winning yourself from any kind of behavior, then you can insult or make any kind of wise behavior. As explained, if one is listening attentively and with due respect and practicing properly, then even with one noting how it is beneficial, how it is precious, those who have noted, or the people who are noted, they come to realize. So in that way, you will come to understand the preciousness of even the one noting, and you know how it will achieve you to attain the real civilization in oneself. So once you have understood this high esteem nature or the preciousness of this Dhamma, you really devote to this Dhamma, you cherish it, and you pay very much attention to it. So in that way, from your bodily behavior, etc., in whatever you do or you behave, you will be behaving with the noting mind or with the presence of mindfulness. But Sayadaw says the yogis are in this center already for 1 week. Whenever there's they dismiss from this meditation hall, they just go back like the school children. That means they are looking here and there without the presence of mindfulness. That means they are not seriously noting. And we have to remember that if we are noting superficially, then we cannot understand these truths. So that's why we should make a habit to note it seriously, and when we come to understand the preciousness of this Dhamma nature, we really cherish it and we really value it. So these people are the one who knows the benefit of the preciousness of this Dhamma. With each and every moment of noting, they will be noting attentively and with due respect. So to come to understand to this line, Sayadaw come to his end of talk, and he says that with this kind of understanding, while you are practicing meditation, may you all be able to practice well to make what while you are staying here.